The unseen encounter. Ethan Carter was never meant to be in that room. It was supposed to be a routine day at the research facility, just another shift where he analyzed data and checked security protocols. He wasn't a scientist, not exactly. His job was more about keeping the systems running, monitoring the labs, making sure everything was secure. He had seen glimpses of the experiments being conducted, but he never asked too many questions. The people in white lab coats were the ones who handled all that. But today was different. A sudden power surge had caused a system failure in Lab 7, one of the most classified sections of the facility. The security doors had locked down, and the cameras had gone offline. Ethan was the closest technician available, and when the emergency call came through, he didn't think twice before rushing to fix the issue. As he swiped his keycard and stepped inside, the air felt heavier, thick with something unseen. The lab was dimly lit, the red emergency lights casting eerie shadows. In the center of the room was a large containment pod, covered in frost from the cryogenic system. Strange symbols were carved along its edges, markings that Ethan didn't recognize. Inside the pod was something, alive. A creature, humanoid in shape, but clearly not human, lay curled up in a fetal position. Its skin shimmered like liquid metal, shifting between hues of deep blue and silver. Delicate ridges lined its arms and shoulders, pulsating faintly as if responding to the room's temperature. It wasn't moving. Was it asleep? Unconscious? Ethan swallowed hard. He had heard rumors, whispers among the staff about a secret experiment, a captured alien, a life form unlike anything Earth had ever encountered. But seeing it with his own eyes was something else entirely. He stepped closer, the hum of the failing cryosystem ringing in his ears. His fingers hovered over the control panel. The display flashed warnings. System failure. Temperature unstable. Containment compromised. Not good. If the system crashed completely, whatever was inside that pod would wake up. And if the rumors were true, that was the last thing anyone wanted. Ethan tapped the screen, trying to reboot the cooling system manually. Come on, work. Sweat formed on his forehead as the machine refused to cooperate. A loud crack echoed through the lab. He froze. A long, thin fissure spread across the pod's glass surface, light spilling through the cracks like liquid silver. The temperature in the room dropped sharply, making Ethan's breath turn to mist. And then the glass shattered. The explosion of ice and mist sent Ethan stumbling backward. He landed hard against a metal table, knocking over equipment as he scrambled to his feet. The lab filled with thick, white vapor, blinding him for a moment. Then, movement. A low, vibrating hum filled the air, resonating deep in Ethan's bones. He turned, heart pounding, as the alien figure slowly rose from the broken pod. Its eyes, large, luminescent, and shifting between shades of violet and gold, locked onto him. Ethan didn't move. Neither did the alien. For a moment, time itself seemed to stop. Then, before he could react, the creature lunged forward. Ethan barely had time to lift his hands in defense, but instead of an attack, something far stranger happened. The alien's hands pressed against Ethan's bare skin. A shockwave of warmth shot through his body, followed by an intense, burning sensation. His mind filled with an overwhelming rush of images, emotions, and voices that weren't his own. He gasped, his knees nearly giving out. What is happening to me? The alien's touch sent a pulse of golden energy rippling across his skin, seeping into him, binding itself to his very essence. Ethan felt his thoughts blur, his senses heighten. He could hear the alien's heartbeat, inside his own chest. He could feel its emotions, fear, confusion, and something else, recognition. The pain vanished as quickly as it had come. The energy settled, leaving behind an unshakable truth in Ethan's mind. He was bonded, permanently. A sharp alarm blared through the speakers, snapping Ethan back to reality. The lab's security system had activated. Red warning lights flashed, and a robotic voice announced, "Containment breach detected. Security lockdown initiated." Doors slammed shut, heavy shutters locked into place. The entire lab was now a sealed vault. Ethan turned to the alien, breathing hard. What did you do to me?" The alien's gaze softened. Its voice, not spoken but felt inside Ethan's mind, whispered a single word: "Survive." And just like that, the real nightmare began. The bond cannot be broken. Ethan Carter was not alone anymore. He could feel it. Something inside him had changed. It wasn't just a physical reaction. It was deeper, something beyond comprehension. The presence of another mind, another consciousness, was inside him, woven into his very existence. It was as if an invisible thread now linked him to the alien standing before him. The being, Kerix, stood still, his violet gold eyes unblinking, studying Ethan with a mix of confusion and curiosity. His shimmering blue-silver skin pulsed faintly, as though responding to an unseen rhythm. Ethan, still shaking from the shock of what had just happened, pressed his palm against the cold metal table to steady himself. A sharp pain shot through his skull. He groaned, grabbing his temples as a rush of foreign thoughts flooded his mind. Emotions that weren't his, memories that didn't belong to him. Flashes of Kerix's past raced through his head. Images of a vast, endless sky filled with swirling nebulae. A world of towering crystalline structures that sang when the wind passed through them. He saw beings like Kerix, their forms shifting in harmony with the light, moving with an elegance that felt almost unnatural. And then, destruction, fire, war. Kerix's home world, once beautiful and alive, was now in ruins. Humans had been there. Ethan didn't understand everything, but one thing was clear. Kerix's people had been hunted, captured, exterminated. Ethan gasped and stumbled backward, snapping free from the vision. His own memories crashed back into place, but the lingering echoes of Kerix's past remained, haunting him. The alien narrowed his glowing eyes. "You see now," the voice inside Ethan's mind whispered. "You know what they have done." Before Ethan could answer, the blaring alarms in the lab grew louder. The robotic voice of the security system crackled overhead. "Warning. Subject containment failure. Security breach detected. Immediate lockdown initiated." The walls shifted. Heavy reinforced panels slid into place, sealing every possible exit. The observation window at the back of the lab darkened as blast-proof shielding lowered over it. They were trapped. Ethan turned toward the main door just as a series of mechanical clicks echoed from the other side. Then, hissing sounds. Gas. A thick white mist began to seep through the vents, curling around the floor like ghostly tendrils. Ethan knew what it was. Neurotoxin. A quick, non-lethal way to knock out a rogue test subject. Or in this case, both of them. He coughed, backing away. His vision blurred at the edges. His limbs felt sluggish, as though his body were trying to shut down. Kerix, however, remained unaffected. He tilted his head, watching Ethan struggle, then took a slow step forward. And then, something incredible happened. The air around Kerix shifted, forming a faint, shimmering barrier. Ethan could feel it. An energy pulse, a presence wrapping around him, pushing the gas away like an unseen force field. The bond was protecting him. Kerix's voice echoed in his mind, calm but urgent. "We are one now. Your pain is mine. Your death is mine. This cannot be undone." Ethan swallowed hard. He hadn't chosen this. He hadn't asked to be bonded with an alien life form. But now, their fates were tied together. A sharp banging on the sealed lab door made him jump. The muffled sound of voices followed, distorted by the thick walls. Then came the unmistakable whine of a plasma cutter. They were coming. Ethan turned to Kerix. "Listen," he said, his voice hoarse. "They're going to come in here any second, and I don't think they'll be friendly. If you can break that door down, now's the time." Kerix blinked once, his gaze unreadable. "Why would you help me?" Ethan hesitated. Because he wasn't sure what would happen if Kerix was taken again. Because, despite everything, something deep inside him, something new, was telling him that Kerix wasn't the threat here. Before he could answer, the plasma cutter burned through the final locking mechanism. The door hissed and groaned as it was forced open. Then, chaos. A team of armed security officers flooded into the room, their visors reflecting the red emergency lights. Their weapons, sleek black rifles lined with glowing energy cores, snapped up in perfect synchronization. Jeet all on the ground. Now, one of them barked. Ethan raised his hands instinctively. His heart pounded. He could feel Kerix's tension, the alien's own instincts flaring through their connection. They won't let him live. The realization hit Ethan like a punch to the gut. The moment they restrained Kerix, they'd take him away, dissect him, study him, use him. He was the last of his kind, and these people wanted to make sure he stayed that way. A commander stepped forward, his helmet reflecting the shattered containment pod. His voice was cold and calculating. "Stand down," he ordered. "Step away from the subject, Carter. You don't understand what you're dealing with." Ethan clenched his fists. Oh, but he did. He understood now. And he wasn't about to let them take Kerix. The bond pulsed between them, a silent understanding passing in an instant. They had one shot. Kerix moved first. With inhuman speed, he surged forward, his form shifting like liquid light. Before the guards could react, an invisible wave of energy rippled through the room, knocking them off their feet. Their weapons went flying, crashing into the walls. Ethan didn't hesitate. He grabbed the closest rifle, spinning toward the exit. Kerix, move. The alien didn't need to be told twice. Together, they ran. Security alarms blared. Doors slammed shut behind them. But Ethan knew one thing for sure. There was no turning back now. Escape or surrender. Ethan's heart pounded as he sprinted down the cold metal corridors, Kerix gliding silently beside him. The alarm lights flashed a deep crimson, bathing everything in a pulsing, eerie glow. Behind them, the sounds of shouting guards and heavy boots echoed through the halls, growing louder with every passing second. "We have to move faster." Ethan glanced at Kerix. The alien was unnervingly quiet, his luminescent eyes scanning their surroundings with a cold precision. His liquid-like skin shifted between deep blue and silver, reflecting the flickering emergency lights as if his body were absorbing them. "This way," Ethan hissed, ducking into a side corridor. But Kerix stopped. Ethan skidded to a halt and turned. "What are you doing?" "We need to go." Kerix didn't answer, at least, not with words. Instead, Ethan felt it. A sudden, sharp sensation in his chest. It wasn't pain, exactly. More like an instinct, something deep inside warning him of danger. And then he understood. Kerix wasn't just looking ahead. He was sensing the soldiers. A chill ran down Ethan's spine. The bond between them was growing stronger. He could feel Kerix's awareness stretching outward, feeling the movement of the enemy without seeing them. And then, a flash of danger. Ethan's body tensed just before Kerix grabbed his wrist and yanked him backward. A split second later, the corridor erupted in a hail of plasma fire. The wall where Ethan had been standing melted into slag, the air hissing as the superheated energy cooled. Sparks flew, and the stench of burnt metal filled the air. Ethan barely had time to register what had happened before Kerix moved. The alien didn't run. He attacked. With an unnatural grace, Kerix surged forward, his body blurring like liquid light. The soldiers barely had time to react before a shockwave of force rippled from him, sending them sprawling like rag dolls. Their weapons clattered to the ground, some sliding across the floor. Ethan's mouth went dry. Kerix hadn't touched them. It was as if an invisible pulse of energy had radiated from his body, an unseen force slamming into anything in its path. Ethan had seen things in this facility, classified tech, weapons beyond human understanding, but nothing like this. Kerix turned to face him, his glowing eyes unreadable. "We need to go." Ethan nodded, swallowing his fear. He grabbed a discarded rifle and took off running again, this time trusting the alien to lead. The lab's deadliest secret. They darted through the labyrinthine corridors, past locked rooms filled with technology Ethan couldn't even begin to understand. This wasn't just a research lab. It was a prison. A place where things far more dangerous than Kerix had been kept and studied. And then they reached a door unlike any other. It was massive, reinforced with layers of titanium plating, humming with power. Unlike the other doors, which had keycard locks, this one required a biometric scan. Kerix paused, his body tensing. Ethan frowned. "What is it?" Kerix's answer wasn't spoken, it was felt. Something was behind this door, something alive. A cold dread settled in Ethan's stomach. They weren't just keeping you here, were they? Kerix slowly turned to face him. His voice in Ethan's mind was quiet, but heavy. "No, I was not their greatest experiment." A deep mechanical hiss filled the air. Ethan barely had time to react before the door unlocked itself. A monster awakens. The heavy doors slid open with a deep, guttural groan, revealing darkness. A vast chamber stretched beyond, filled with thick cables and flickering red lights. Large cylindrical containment units lined the walls, their glass surfaces covered in condensation. And then, movement. Ethan's breath caught in his throat as something shifted in the darkness. A low, rumbling growl vibrated through the air, primal and alien. Kerix took a step back. Ethan had never seen the alien afraid before. A figure emerged from the shadows. Massive. Wrong. At first glance, it looked humanoid, but something was deeply unnatural about it. Its elongated limbs twisted in unnatural ways, its blackened skin pulsing with sickly green veins. When it turned its head, its eyes weren't eyes at all, but endless voids, swallowing the light. Ethan felt a wave of nausea wash over him. Whatever this thing was, it wasn't alive in the way Kerix was. It was something else, something made. The creature's mouth parted, revealing jagged, irregular teeth. And then, it spoke. A guttural, broken voice, layered with static. "We remember you." Ethan's stomach dropped. Kerix stiffened beside him, his hands curling into fists. This is what they were creating. A weapon. Ethan didn't need to be told twice. This thing, this abomination, wasn't an alien. It was something built using alien DNA. An experiment. A hybrid. And now it was loose. Nowhere left to run. A deep thrumming noise filled the air as the hybrid creature moved. Its body warped and shifted, the air around it vibrating like a mirage. Ethan could barely think before it lunged. Kerix reacted instantly. A burst of energy exploded from his body, slamming into the creature with enough force to crack the floor beneath it. The monster reeled, its twisted limbs flailing. But it didn't fall. Instead, it absorbed the impact. The sickly green veins pulsed brighter. The thing's form grew stronger, taller. It was feeding off the energy. Kerix froze. "That's not possible." Ethan gritted his teeth. "It just happened. So we need a new plan." The hybrid snarled and lunged again. Ethan did the only thing he could. He fired. A hail of plasma bolts tore through the air, striking the creature square in the chest. It barely flinched. They had seconds, maybe less. Ethan turned to Kerix. "Can you break through the wall?" Kerix's glowing eyes flickered as he calculated. "I can. But only once." Ethan glanced at the monster, then back to Kerix. He didn't hesitate. "Then do it." Kerix thrust both hands forward. A wave of golden white energy exploded from his body, striking the far wall with impossible force. The metal ripped apart, creating a gaping exit. "Freedom. Go," Ethan shouted. Kerix grabbed Ethan and leaped through the opening just as the hybrid creature lunged. And then they were falling. The world spun as they tumbled into the unknown, and behind them, the nightmare they had just escaped was only beginning. A dangerous alliance. Darkness swallowed them as they fell. Ethan barely had time to process what was happening before he crashed into something hard. Pain shot through his body, knocking the breath from his lungs. He rolled across a rough metal surface, his limbs flailing for anything to hold onto. Kerix landed beside him, far more gracefully, his alien form shifting midair to absorb the impact. Ethan groaned, his hands scraping against cold steel as he pushed himself up. They had fallen into a lower level of the facility, one that shouldn't exist. Dim emergency lights flickered along the walls, casting eerie shadows across the industrial maze of pipes and machinery. The air was thick, stale, as if it hadn't been circulated in years. Ethan coughed, glancing at Kerix. "You okay?" Kerix didn't answer. His glowing eyes were fixed upward, toward the gaping hole they had just plunged through. Something moved above them. Ethan's stomach twisted. The hybrid creature they had barely escaped was peering down at them. Its obsidian eyes locked onto them like a predator studying its prey. It let out a low, distorted growl, a sound that crawled under Ethan's skin like insects. Then it vanished. Not retreated. Vanished. 1 second it was there. The next, the shadows swallowed it whole. Ethan's pulse hammered in his ears. "That thing is still hunting us, isn't it?" Kerix nodded, his expression unreadable. "Yes, and it is learning." A chill ran down Ethan's spine. He didn't like the sound of that. They had to keep moving. The underground lab. The lower level stretched endlessly, a labyrinth of forgotten technology and discarded experiments. Rows of abandoned containment pods lined the walls, their glass panels cracked and fogged over with age. Some were empty. Others still held things. Ethan didn't stop to look. "This place," he muttered, glancing around. "It's different from the labs above." Kerix ran his hand along one of the nearby machines, his expression dark. This was their first attempt. Ethan frowned. "At what?" Kerix turned to him. "At playing gods." The word sent a shiver down Ethan's spine. The government had been trying to create something here, something beyond human, beyond alien. Kerix wasn't just a prisoner. He was a survivor. And whatever had been made in this lab, it wasn't meant to exist. Ethan inhaled sharply, forcing himself to focus. "We need to find a way out of here before that thing catches up." Kerix nodded. "There is an exit, but it will not be unguarded." Ethan clenched his fists. Figures. But before they could move, a voice echoed through the corridors. "You shouldn't be here." Ethan spun around, rifle raised. A figure emerged from the shadows. A human. Or at least, it looked human. Tall, draped in a dark research uniform. The man's skin was too pale, his eyes too reflective. There was something off about the way he moved, too precise, too measured. Kerix tensed beside Ethan. "He is not one of yours." Ethan swallowed hard. "No kidding." The man tilted his head, studying them with an unnatural stillness. Then he smiled. "You let it out, didn't you?" he said, his voice smooth as glass. "The hybrid." Ethan tightened his grip on his weapon. "And who the hell are you?" The man ignored the question. "That thing up there, it was never meant to be finished. You've doomed us all." Kerix took a step forward, his presence radiating an unseen force. "You made it. You let it evolve." The man's smile didn't waver. "I didn't make it, but I did warn them." He sighed, shaking his head. "And now, we don't have much time." Ethan exchanged a wary glance with Kerix. "You're saying that thing is out of control." The man's reflective eyes gleamed in the dim light. "I'm saying it was never in control to begin with." Ethan exhaled sharply. This just kept getting worse. The hybrid wasn't just another experiment. It was the culmination of everything this facility had been working toward. And now, it was loose. The offer. The man took a slow step forward. "I can help you escape," he said, "but I need something in return." Ethan didn't lower his weapon. "What kind of help?" The man smirked. "A way out. This facility is more than what you think. It has doors that don't exist on any blueprint, passages that lead to places beyond Earth. I know where they are." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "And what do you want in return?" The man's gaze flickered to Carrick's. The alien. Carrick stiffened, his muscles tensing. Ethan felt it through the bond. A cold, sharp warning. "No deal," Ethan snapped immediately. The man chuckled. "That's cute. You think you have a choice." He gestured behind him, and suddenly they weren't alone. Figures emerged from the darkness, humanoid in shape but unnatural in movement. Their eyes were just like the man's, mirror-like, reflecting everything and nothing at once. Ethan's throat went dry. "What the hell are they?" The man smiled. "The ones who came before." Carrick's let out a low warning growl, his energy surging through the air. "They are not human." Ethan's grip tightened on his rifle. No kidding. They were outnumbered, outgunned, trapped in an underground lab with a rogue experiment hunting them above, and something worse standing in front of them. Ethan took a deep breath. "So, any bright ideas?" Carrick's eyes glowed brighter. "Yes," the alien said simply. "We fight." The mirrored-eyed figures moved, and the real battle began. The lab's dark secret. The underground lab was no longer silent. The air shook with the force of unseen energy, vibrating with the power of two ancient forces colliding. Carrick's luminous form flared, his entire body pulsing with waves of golden-white energy. Opposite him, the mirrored-eye beings advanced, their movements eerily synchronized, their reflective eyes absorbing the dim emergency lighting like bottomless voids. Ethan stood in the middle of it all, his mind racing. One wrong move, and they were dead. The man who had led these creatures, this strange, inhuman scientist, remained eerily calm, watching the standoff like a researcher observing lab rats. Then, with a lazy smirk, he lifted his hand. The mirrored-eyed figures lunged. Survival at all costs. Ethan's reflexes kicked in. He squeezed the trigger, his plasma rifle roaring to life. Bright blue bolts of energy tore through the air, striking the closest figure square in the chest. But instead of dropping, the thing absorbed the impact. The plasma bolt sank into its body, as if swallowed by liquid metal, its chest rippling like disturbed water. A second later, the wound vanished, the energy feeding into its form instead of damaging it. Ethan barely had time to curse before the creature closed the distance. Faster than a human, faster than anything should be. It lashed out. Ethan barely dodged, rolling across the cold steel floor as razor-sharp fingers sliced through the air where his head had been seconds ago. Sparks flew as the creature's attack gouged deep scars into the metal. "HFY absorbing energy," Ethan shouted, scrambling back. Carrick didn't hesitate. His glowing hands shifted, and for the first time, Ethan saw what real alien combat, the ultimate betrayal. The underground lab was dying. Metal screamed as support beams buckled under unseen pressure. Walls trembled, sending cracks splintering like veins of broken glass. The air was thick with electrical discharge, static crawling over Ethan's skin as the entire facility groaned like a living thing in pain. And in the center of it all, the abomination stood tall. Its body had changed again. No longer fully organic, no longer just alien or human. It was something else, something that should never have existed. Its elongated limbs cracked and reshaped, pulsing with veins of unnatural energy, its hollow void eyes watching Ethan with something far worse than malice, understanding. It knew them, and it was still learning. The escape plan. Ethan's grip on his rifle tightened. He had seconds to make a decision. They couldn't fight this thing, not with the way it was evolving with every second. If they stayed here, they'd be buried alive with it. Carrick stood beside him, golden energy flickering around his hands, but his stance was different. Tense, reluctant. He wasn't preparing to fight. He was preparing to run. Ethan took a step back, heart pounding. "Tell me you have a way out of here." Kerix didn't answer immediately. His glowing violet eyes were locked onto the creature, as if recognizing something Ethan couldn't see. Finally, his voice whispered through their mental link. "There is a way, but you will not like it." A loud crack echoed overhead. A massive steel beam snapped, plummeting down, narrowly missing them as it smashed into the floor. The creature didn't even flinch. It took a slow, deliberate step forward. Ethan felt its presence in his mind, not just through the bond with Kerix, something deeper, but cold, invasive pressure scraping against his thoughts, attempting to dig its way inside. Kerix shoved Ethan backward. "We have to go. Now." A new sound cut through the collapsing lab, the blaring of a security override. Somewhere in the facility, the lockdown was being lifted. Someone had activated it. Ethan's stomach twisted. That meant one of two things. Either the remaining researchers were abandoning the place and unlocking the exits, or someone wanted them to get out. Who the hell? His answer came in the form of a voice echoing over the facility intercom. "You don't have much time. I suggest you start running." It was him, the mirrored-eyed scientist. Ethan's blood ran cold. Why would he? Kerix grabbed Ethan's wrist. "Movie." They ran. A door that shouldn't exist. Kerix led them through a twisting maze of corridors Ethan had never seen before. The facility was coming apart at the seams, bulkheads snapping, lights flickering, sparks raining down like fireflies in the dark. Every step they took felt like a race against death. Then they saw it. A door, but not just any door. It was wrong. Unlike the cold steel architecture of the lab, this door was ancient, a massive black gateway, covered in shifting golden symbols. The air around it warped, like heat rippling off pavement. It wasn't human. Ethan skidded to a stop. "What the hell is that?" Kerix didn't hesitate. He pressed his palm against the glowing symbols, and the door responded. The patterns flared to life, pulsing in perfect synchronization with Kerix's own energy. The door unlocked itself. The space beyond was not a hallway, not another lab, not anything human-made. It was a gateway. Ethan stared, his entire brain rejecting what he was seeing. It wasn't just another room. It was a breach in reality itself. The space beyond it. Kerix turned to him, his expression unreadable. "We must go through." Ethan hesitated. "And if we don't?" A deafening roar echoed behind them. The creature. It was coming. Kerix grabbed Ethan by the shoulder. "There is no other choice." Betrayal in the void. The second they stepped through the portal, reality shifted. Ethan's mind fractured. It felt like being ripped apart and stitched back together in a place that shouldn't exist. Colors he had no words for burned into his vision, his lungs gasping for air that wasn't air at all. Then, solid ground. Ethan collapsed, his body shaking, his brain screaming to catch up with what had just happened. They were no longer underground, no longer even on Earth. He looked up, and his blood froze. They were in a massive open chamber, surrounded by towering black obelisks covered in shifting symbols. Lightless, weightless, a place outside of time. Kerix stood ahead of him, perfectly still, and standing in the center of it all was the mirrored-eyed scientist, waiting for them. Ethan's heart slammed into his ribs. "You set us up," he breathed. The man smiled, stepping forward. "Of course I did." Kerix tensed beside Ethan, his hands glowing with energy. "You knew we would come here," the alien said coldly. "You wanted this." The scientist's smile widened. "You didn't escape," he said softly. "You simply came home." Ethan felt something move. Not physically. Inside him, a sickening realization dawned. This wasn't an escape route. It was a trap. And whatever Kerix had been running from, whoever had created the hybrids, the experiments, the abominations, they were here, watching, waiting, and they wanted him back. Ethan reached for his rifle, but the scientist lifted a hand. Ethan's body locked in place, his muscles seized, his limbs frozen, not by pain, not by an attack, by command. Ethan couldn't move. He couldn't even breathe. Kerix snarled, golden energy flaring, but before he could react, a voice whispered through the chamber. A voice that wasn't human. "You have returned to us, child." Kerix staggered. His glowing eyes widened in horror. "No," he whispered, "it cannot be you." The scientist's smile vanished. He knelt on one knee, bowing his head. And from the shadows, something moved. Something vast. Something ancient. Ethan's mind shattered. Because standing before them was a being that had no right to exist. A god. A creator. And it had been waiting for Kerix to come home. Evolution or annihilation? Ethan couldn't move. His body was frozen in place, held by an invisible force that pressed against his bones, his muscles, his very existence. His mind screamed at him to run, to fight, to do anything other than stand helplessly in the presence of something incomprehensible. But he couldn't, because whatever this was, this entity that had emerged from the void, was beyond him, beyond human, beyond Kerix, beyond gods. The air itself thickened, shifting like liquid, bending around the entity's form as if reality itself refused to touch it. It had no single shape, no defined edges. It was both shadow and light, a shifting storm of consciousness wrapped in a form that was impossible to fully comprehend. Ethan's mind couldn't process it properly. Every time he tried to focus on it, it seemed to change, growing, shrinking, unraveling into threads of glowing symbols before reassembling into something even more horrifying. And then it spoke. Not in words, not in sound. It spoke inside his bones, inside his blood, inside the spaces between his atoms. "You have returned to us, child." Kerix. Ethan's frozen body trembled as he felt the weight of the words crash into Kerix through their bond. Kerix, who had fought tirelessly, had escaped, had resisted everything this docility had done to him, staggered backward like he had just been stabbed. "No." Kerix's voice trembled, the glow in his violet gold eyes flickering, as if something inside him had fractured. "You are gone. You were destroyed." The entity did not move. It did not blink, did not shift. But its voice resonated again, like the memory of 1,000 voices speaking at once. "You cannot destroy that which created you." Ethan's breath hitched. He turned his eyes toward Kerix. The alien was shaking. His hands, which had once been weapons of pure energy, were flickering, unstable. His expression, normally calm, unreadable, was now filled with something Ethan had never seen in him before. Fear. Real, unshakable fear. Ethan gritted his teeth and tried to force his body to move, to break free from whatever unseen force held him in place. Nothing. He was locked in, a prisoner in his own skin. The truth of Kerix's past. The mirrored-eyed scientist finally spoke, his voice calm, almost amused. "You never truly understood what you are, did you?" He turned his reflective gaze to Kerix. "You thought you were an escapee, a survivor." The scientist gestured toward the entity. "But you were never running from us. You were running from them." Kerix's body tensed. Ethan felt something coil in his mind, a storm of emotions that weren't his own. Rage, denial, pain. Kerix clenched his fists. "I am not yours." The entity finally moved. Not physically, not with limbs or a body, but the space around it shifted, bending inward, crushing under an unseen weight. It wasn't speaking anymore. It was remembering. And Ethan, through the bond, saw it all. A vision slammed into him with the force of an exploding star. Kerix's people, his race, were never natural. They were created, not born, built, perfected, engineered to be the ultimate species, a blend of matter and energy, minds that could shape the very fabric of existence. Their creators, these eldritch architects, had made them for one purpose: to be vessels, to be harvested, to be used. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. Kerix wasn't just the last of his kind. He was unfinished, an incomplete weapon. And now, they had come to take him back. The impossible choice. Kerix snapped out of his trance. The golden energy around him flared violently, but it was different now. Wild, unstable. The ground beneath them trembled as his power surged, shaking the entire chamber. "No," Kerix whispered, his voice breaking. "I am not yours." Ethan suddenly felt his body unlock. He gasped, his knees nearly giving out as he staggered backward, free from the unseen force that had held him in place. He didn't hesitate. He grabbed his rifle, raised it, aimed it at the impossible being standing before them, and fired. The plasma bolt vanished. The entity didn't even react. The energy from the blast simply ceased to exist. Ethan felt cold terror crawl up his spine. Kerix turned to him. "You must leave." Ethan shook his head. "Not happening. We go together." Kerix grabbed Ethan's wrist. For the first time, his glowing eyes were filled with something deeply human. Regret. "I cannot leave." Ethan felt the bond tremble. Kerix was breaking it. Ethan's breath caught. "What? No, you can't." Kerix shoved him. Ethan's vision collapsed. The world twisted, bent, flipped inside out. And then, he was somewhere else. The final evolution. Ethan hit the ground hard. The air was different. Cold. Empty. He was outside. Outside the facility. Outside the lab. On a mountain plateau overlooking a ruined landscape. The portal was still open behind him, the only thing left of that strange place. And through it, he could see Kerix, standing alone, facing them, facing it. Kerix turned his gaze toward Ethan one last time. And then, he let go. The bond snapped. Ethan felt it break inside him, like a second heart ripping apart. The portal shut. Ethan was left alone. Silence fell. The cold wind howled. Kerix was gone. But something else had changed. Because as Ethan slowly looked down at his hands, he saw something glowing beneath his skin. Golden veins of energy. The bond was broken. But Kerix's power had stayed. And now, Ethan wasn't just human anymore. He was something else. Something new. And whatever was coming next, he was ready.